Hi, I'm Mel Van Dusen, and welcome to the show. The Buddhist first teaching was the truth of suffering. Given that fact, how do we live our lives? What do we do with it? Can suffering be transformed? Our guest tonight is Edie Hartshorne, and Edie is a therapist, a writer, a musician, and a former Fulbright scholar in Uruguay. And Edie has written this wonderful, luminous book, Light in Blue Shadows, and which in the book she talks about how she coped with the grief over the death of her son Jonathan, and how that grief was transformed as it was experienced. And let's meet Edie. Edie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Now let's not ignore the elephant in the middle of the room. What is this thing?
This is a Japanese instrument. It's a koto.
Uh-huh.
And it's a classical instrument that's played. There's a classical repertoire, chamber music.
Uh-huh.
And it's not played so often now in Japan because contemporary Western music is more popular. But I studied koto in Japan and in this country, and had a classical Japanese performing group with my husband called Rein Kai, which means zero sound group.
How can that be?
Well, that's the paradox of Zen.
Paradox of Zen. Okay, and you use sound for the purposes of healing. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, I became very interested when I was living in Japan, but the difference between Japanese music and Western music. And there seemed to be much more spaciousness and even silence between the notes. When I returned, I began performing with a colleague who played Tibetan bowls. And we got interested in exploring resonance of the sound of the koto and also bamboo flutes, because I'm also trained in Western music.
Right. Classically trained Western and Eastern systems, yes.
And we started exploring combining the flutes and the bells and the resonance or decay when you strike the bells. There's a vibration that you can actually feel in your body. And over the years, because I was also practicing as a therapist, I am a therapist, I got very interested in the effect of playing these bells at a certain moment in therapy in order to help the person, give the person I was working with the experience of dropping in to another place besides the thinking, questioning mind.
Right. You once said, our subtle body recognizes its own resonance in sound and vibration. For people who don't know what the subtle body is or how that could work, could you talk about that a bit?
What I understand is that energetically, we move about, we move our arms, we experience our bodies, but we also have an energy field which is around our bodies. And sometimes you can feel that if you have a massage, or if you even just place your hands close together, like this, you can feel heat. And so there is some energy coming from the body. And that energy is called an aura or a subtle body. And it's part of our whole energetic field.
Right.
And
I've lost my train of thought by feeling this aura, but go ahead.
So what interested me from my own response to the sound of these bells, I could feel in my bones the vibration. I could feel a kind of settling in my body. And of course in Buddhist meditation and many meditation practices, we ring the bell, and Thich Nhat Hanh says, listen, listen, this wonderful sound calls me back to my true self.
Wow.
Would you like me to
yes,
ring the
please,
bell?
Please, yes.
So I became interested in how can we access part of our wise knowing by using sound. So I'll play just a little bit of the bells to give you a sense.
Sure. though this is being filmed on camera, and I'm usually somewhat keyed up when I'm on camera, that makes me forget the camera.
There's a kind
That's
of
nice.
calming.
Yeah, it really is.
And because it is affecting our bodies.
Uh-huh. Now you have a tea house at home, and you do sound therapy with people. Could you briefly describe what you do and how people are helped by that?
I built a Japanese tea house after we came back from Kyoto.
Uh-huh.
And as a therapist, I'm interested in inquiring, asking to explore what it is that we don't know about ourselves that might give us a greater range of well-being. And so I combine some speaking, and then I invite the person to lie on the tatami mat, and I put the bowls on their body and also around the body. And I have matching sets, so the tone of the bell that I put on the right and left side of the brain as you're lying down is exactly the same resonance, the same pitch. And research has been done showing that the effect of this is to equalize the two sides of the brain, so that the right and left sides are vibrating more at the same frequency.
And what do the people you work with report after having experienced this?
I would say everyone reports feeling calm. Many people have said, I've never experienced anything like this. And very often, just in this moment of being with oneself and the sound, a person will access inner knowing and wisdom that they didn't know. So there's a sense of well-being, but also of discovery.
Right.
And of course, that's tremendously gratifying.
Yeah. Now, this book, Light in Blue Shadows, tell us about it. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, Mel, I started writing really just as a way to survive, because after a child dies, after someone we love dies, there's a shattering of ourselves and our perception of what's true, and everything is turned upside down. And one of the ways that was helpful for me was to begin writing. I was in a wonderful writing circle with women where I could write and then read aloud, and the circle of women, of listeners, would just simply witness. So each one of us could read what we wrote, and I just wrote, trying to survive. And then I was with people who simply listened. And that witnessing, as well as the writing, was just enormously helpful in my trying to sort the experience out.
Right. So just to have someone available who can listen and not give advice, that's tremendously important for you. For anybody.
It makes such a difference. And very often people don't know what to say, especially when a child dies. I remember one woman came and said, "Oh, I know just how you feel. My cat died." And I was so mad. I mean, I was in despair. So, to develop the skill of being able to just be present with a dear one who is suffering and listen is such a gift. So I began discovering that gift also in writing.
Yeah,
and in the beginning, I just really did it for myself.
Right. Jonathan was how old when he died?
He was 20, yeah.
Right. And originally they thought the coroner made the diagnosis of suicide, I think.
That was the first thing we were told.
Right. And so
over the telephone.
In addition to having your son die, to get news like that, which was totally out of character for what you knew him to be, what just added on to it.
It was horrible. I mean, we were just undone.
Could you tell us briefly about how you discovered that actually it wasn't suicide?
What happened was, at first we were told he was found with CO2 cartridges in his room. We later discovered they were nitrous oxide cartridges from whipped cream canisters. The police had made a mistake. They also made mistakes in the blood report. And when I found out that they were nitrous oxide canisters, and I began telling friends, I got calls from all over the country saying, you know, I just heard about a kid who died using nitrous. I'm sure this was an accident. So I began questioning the report. It then took an enormous amount of research on my husband's. Robin made a huge effort to look very deeply and really find out, was this an accident or was it suicide?
And how long did it take to find out?
Oh, many months. Many months.
So during all this time, you were in
we
turmoil.
were struggling and trying to find out the truth because we wanted to know for our own well-being. And in the end, after all the research and tracking Jonathan's activities, we were sure that it was an accident, and the coroner changed the report. And since then, I've met many parents whose kids have died using nitrous or substances. And of course, when a child is dead, they're dead.
Right.
Finding out it was an accident didn't bring him back. So,
in addition to being with sympathetic people who grace your life by simply listening to what you have to say, what else has helped you cope with your grief and transform it? In this book, your grief was transformed into something beautiful. Would you talk about that?
Well, one of the things that I discovered that I had no idea about was in the very beginning, when you're in a state of shock and shaking and feel as if the world is going to end, there is also a possibility of an extraordinary moment of grace when suddenly you have this feeling of divine presence or of kindness. And that was very surprising to me. And I experienced that almost as an opening to the other world several times. So
do you have an example of that from your book?
I'd like to just read a passage because this was it was so astonishing to me. So this is a moment when I'm in Grace Cathedral walking the labyrinth in San Francisco with my younger son, Benji. And we've been walking the labyrinths at New Year's. Coming out of my reverie, I open my eyes and look up. I am stunned to see Jonathan's face again. He lingers above me under the great stone arches, luminous and smiling. Filling the entire space of the vaulted cathedral, he seems to float, suspended above me, transparent. He is radiant, as if filled with light. He speaks to me again. I'm here with you. I love you. The sweetness in his voice goes right to my heart. I feel hot all over and start sweating. This sensation stays for many minutes. Am I losing my mind? Is this real? How could this happen again? I am not a person who sees visions, but he seems so close, so tender and alive. Jonathan, what are you trying to tell me about your life, about your death? When finally I stumble out of the maze, I'm exhausted. Benji sits cross-legged in perfect, still meditation. His eyes are shut, his head tipped slightly backward, his long blonde hair illuminated by a shaft of light. Perhaps Jonathan has come and entered right into the body of his brother. So this kind of experience I'd never had. And I felt as if it was, in a way, a sort of grace of being cracked open.
And the book is really a record of experiences like this that you've had, of these openings.
In many different ways. Sometimes it was being with my children, listening to music. Other times it was writing Jonathan letters. I know many people, when they lose someone, write letters. And I found this a tremendous comfort. And it also enabled me to remember things I would have just completely forgotten. So can I just read you another little snippet?
Sure.
So many things I never told you while you were alive. And now so much of your life comes back to me. Across the barrier of death, Jonathan, may I tell you of my unspoken loves and longings? I remember the moment you transformed our lives. falling like a sapphire star into my heart, dear Jonathan. I've been writing to you ever since you were born. I found this song I just wrote to you when you were 4 years old. I never would have shown it to you when you were alive, but now everything is different. My milk-white floodgates open, tingling with delight at your nuzzling insistence. So warm and succulent a peach boy. Oh, how could any mother resist so ripe and plump a dumpling bun to kiss and nibble as you squeak with joy? I love you so, my damask oyster. I am ablaze with love. Mm-hmm. So writing enabled me just to remember these many blessings.
Mm-hmm. This book changed your life in many ways, and I think this bowl is in many ways a symbol of how your life was changed. After someone gave you this bowl, you brushed your sleeve against it, fell on the floor, and broke into 4 pieces.
Yes.
Could you talk about that briefly?
Well, I was lying on the sofa, unable to sleep, and I had this blessing bowl from my friend Susan Felix. And I moved my bathrobe and it fell, and it opened like 4 dark blossoms petals. And I was heartbroken. And then the next morning, my friend Susan came and said, "A precious tea bowl, when broken, is always mended with gold." And she brought her gold glue and mended it, and said, "Now it will be like you, more beautiful for the brokenness."
This experience of suffering has opened you up to what's happening in the world today. I think in some ways we can say that the world is broken, just like this bowl was, and you're doing your part to mend this brokenness. And could you talk to us a bit about that? You've been to Hiroshima,
Yes.
Bosnia, and you're associated with A World Without Armies. And what we're going to talk about a little later is the Shuar in the Amazon. And you're with a group called the World Wheel Project. Could you talk to us a bit about these activities?
Yes. Shortly after Jonathan died, I was performing all over the country and was invited to perform with a group called the Atomic Mirror. And the purpose of this performance was the atomic mirror reflecting 50 years of the nuclear age. It was a collection of writings of all the people who have suffered from the atomic bomb, including all the indigenous people where the testing has taken place. And I put this piece to music, and then we were invited to perform right before the 50th anniversary of the bomb all over the country. And then we were invited to Hiroshima. And we went as a pilgrimage in witness and reconciliation, dressed in white. And we went to all of the sites tracking the exact route of the first atomic bomb from White Sands all the way through the Nevada test grounds to Hiroshima.
How did it feel to do that?
It felt so powerful. And when I was in Hiroshima and riding on the train to Hiroshima, I was sitting next to some hibakusha women who had lived through the bomb.
Hibakusha means?
Hibakusha means surviving the bomb. And they had scars, and they were old, of course, because it was 50 years ago. And I started chatting with them and told them that I'm coming to do this performance because I know the suffering of losing a child. And then I got my flute out and I played a Japanese drinking song. And these Japanese women just laughed and laughed. But it was so touching, especially to see the monument to Sadako, the little girl who folded 1,000 cranes. And I
don't know about that. Was she a victim of the bomb, or?
Yes. And there's a famous child story where she is a runner and competing and collapses, and it turns out she has leukemia.
From the bomb.
From the bomb. And she thinks if she can fold 1,000 cranes, that she will become well again. And she dies when she folds 462 grains, I think. And so this story has been written down, and her mother wrote a poem saying, listen to the peace bell, listen. Mothers everywhere, no, people everywhere, listen to the sound of the bell, that we may never again have war.
You know, in a way, you're doing what this woman has done. You're doing things to heal the world and heal yourself. And one of the other things you're doing is you're working with the Shuar Indians in the Amazon. Tell us a bit about that.
I'm working in the Amazon with a project called the World Wheel, which was started by my very dear friend and colleague, Edie Hamilton, who's a wonderful visionary artist, who has been doing a pilgrimage around the world and creating sacred sites with people all over the world in indigenous places. And on her second turning of the wheel, she invited me to join her in Ecuador. And there we are working in two sites, one in the Andes and one in the Amazon. And the Amazon is the site with the Shuar.
Right. You're trying to help the Shuar. Why do the Shuar need our help?
Well, the Shuar need to be protected from the incursion and the devastation of Western culture. And they have been colonized, and their land has been taken away by the Spanish culture and the church. And now the oil companies are intruding on their land. And of course, we all know what's happening in the Amazon and the devastation to the land and the culture.
Time has gone by remarkably fast. I can't believe this. But could we see a cutaway shot of the Shuar and what your friend Vigili is doing? Could we see that now?
Me gusta sí compartir con los niños porque quiero respetar a los niños, porque quiero compartir con ellos lo que somos como indígenas, ayudar a crecer como indígenas, valorar lo que tenemos como indígenas.
Muy contenta, yo estaba muy feliz con este proyecto, era muy lindo y eso es un recuerdo muy grande para nosotros en la comunidad, es muy importante esa piedra y siempre yo me voy.
I started just using the skills that I had used my whole life, which was art, and went to 12 countries, following a parallel around the world, and created sculptures in these 12 countries. And now the second World Wheel, we're really starting centers in each of the countries with schools. And a way of preserving the knowledge of the indigenous people, which is necessary for our survival on this planet. This second World Wheel is dedicated to the children. It is my family, and it has become a way of life. Just to go and be in a new community, have tea with someone. These very, very simple acts is what the World Wheel is made of. I feel great hope for our planet.
Edie, that sculpture your friend did is wonderful. And she's building schools. What else can you tell us about the Shuar? They seem so grounded and so peaceful. What can you tell us about them?
Well, the reason that Vigili wants to start this wisdom center is because these people, as you can see from the film, really are connected with the earth. And the wisdom that they know about preserving the earth, living in harmony with the earth, all their traditional arts, and the fact that they're a shamanic culture, which means that they listen to the teaching plants, ayahuasca, tobacco, datura.
What does that mean, to listen to the
What
teaching
that means
plants?
is that they use the plants, they take the plants into their body, but in a sacred ceremonial way, in order to be able to hear more clearly the truth that the plants and the animals and the earth can tell us, so that we can live in harmony with the world. And we feel this is wisdom which is badly needed at our time now, and that exists with indigenous people.
Okay. So the actual plants connects people with the earth, perhaps by taking away mental chatter and so on, something like that?
Well, when a person takes ayahuasca in a sacred way, then they go into an altered state. And perhaps we know this wisdom in ourselves, but it's very difficult to access. So it's a way of being able to listen more deeply to wisdom which exists. But we in our Western culture have lost that ability.
Yeah.
It's not at all the same as taking drugs.
Yeah, Edie, you've had quite a trip. I mean, you've experienced suffering in yourself, and you've healed that, and you've gone around the world and trying to heal other people. I think this is remarkable.
Well, thank you, Mel. It's such a privilege to be able to work with people in the world, and I'm trying to do a small part, which is, I think, all any one person can do.
Let us hear the sounds of the Amazon. We'll close with this. Edie, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Mel. This is a tri-chambered ocarina, and it was modeled on the ceremonial urns that were used for burial to call the spirit. Okay.